happy Black History Month. Welcome to another episode of TALIA Talks. My name is Talia Bethany, and today I have a really special episode for you guys. Today I'm here at the Old Dillard Museum located in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. The Old Dillard Museum is a historical landmark operated by Broward County Public Schools. It has served as an important focal point of education and culture for Fort Lauderdale's African American community since its construction in the early 20th century. I was fortunate enough to be invited for a tour of the museum before its grand reopening. The first room that we visited was the Story Room. This exhibit archives all of the points of history, specifically in historic Fort Lauderdale Sistrunk area. Key people such as Dr. James Sistrunk, Mizell, and John Hill are all mentioned. The origins of the Colored School, the Old Dillard School, and Walker Elementary School are explained in there as well. This next room had to be my favorite. The next room is the Kids Learning and Enrichment Room. The room is filled with colorful and vibrant colors, and it is home to many basic African concepts and symbols that are ideal for the child's developing mind.
And the two Siamese crocodiles are sharing the same stomach. And what that's supposed to signify is that there's no reason to be jealous or envious of your brother or your neighbor because you guys share the same stomach. So they used the image of two Siamese crocodiles to express unity.
This room is the most interactive with all types of instruments, props, and even board games. Next is the Timeline Room.
We start with African history, we start with slavery. So we actually want to start with the right history of how Africans had their own civilizations, how they came to America. They weren't just brought here for the first time on slave ships. And this is a book that teachers are referencing in Broward County Public Schools.
This room gives a full timeline of the journey of the Black person from ancient civilizations in Africa to slavery, freedom, and the Reconstruction era. This exhibit goes into detail with each key staple in history, creating a whole picture of where we came from and where we can possibly go from here. The Jazz Room, another one of my favorites, is an exact replica of what a jazz room would look like in the early 1900s in historic Fort Lauderdale. The room includes an antique jukebox, a record player, and all types of instruments. Famous jazz legend Cannonball Adderley is from Fort Lauderdale and is the main feature of this room. Last but not least, we have the Heritage Room. This room is an exact replica of what a classroom looked like around 1930 to 1950. There is a chalkboard and even ink slots in each desk where students used to have to dip their writing utensils in to keep the ink wet for writing. There's also a replica of what the average kitchen looked like in the 1900s. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your position here?
Sure. So my name is Easton Harrison. I'm the Community Liaison for the Old Dillard Museum, and I'm also a grassroots organizer and activist.
What makes this museum different from other museums?
Well, the main thing that makes this museum a little different from other museums is that it's smack dab in the middle of a community, the community that it talks about when it comes to the history in here. Another thing is that the relics and artifacts that you see within this museum are still fresh and well kept. And the pictures that you see in this museum, a lot of people who come and visit notice that their cousins and uncles and grandfathers either are on the walls or knew the people that were here. And some people who are still alive was also a part of the history within this museum when it happened back then.
Why is it important to have these types of landmarks within the community?
Well, it's important because it keeps the history alive. It literally keeps the history and the heritage alive. A lot of people pass this building very often and not really know what's inside. And as soon as they come inside of the building, they're just so blown away by all of the information about the community that they lived in, how the neighborhood that they're in today looked completely different just 30, 50 years ago. And it kind of helps make sure that no matter what happens to this community, around this community, we'll always still have a snapshot of what historic Sistrunk and Fort Lauderdale and Broward County at large used to look like.
What has been something you've learned since working here that surprised you?
One thing I've learned is that every time I do a tour, I learn something different. And I learned it from the people that I'm conducting the tour with. You know, I'm usually, at first I thought I was gonna be the one to teach and educate them, but I just learned so much information and more history from the people themselves who have that history within them. that we didn't quite document. So that's one thing that I learned, that there's so much more history out there that can act as a continuum to what we have here at the museum.
Can you talk a little bit about the intersectionality of art and activism and how that plays a part within this museum?
100%. So for one, we talk about a lot of the art that took place within the Harlem Renaissance, a lot of the art that took place within historic Sistrunk, and of course the activism around that. We also bridge that between a lot of the practices that happened in ancient Africa and how they used art, from kente cloth to Dogon tribes and Ashanti tribes, and how they had their form of activism through that as well. But art plays a major role in activism. We've always used art to express ourselves. So if there's an issue that we have, we've always used art as a medium of that. And I feel like this museum does a good job at portraying that.
I know that the museum has a historical attachment to Dillard High School. Could you elaborate on that and within the other schools within the community as well?
Sure. So the museum has a connection to Dillard High School and also Walker Elementary School. This school initially was called the Colored School, but that name changed in 1930 when Joseph A. Ely came and decided to change the name of the school to Dillard, commemorating Dr. James Dillard, the philanthropist that helped get this school started. Since then, the location of the school, this became a museum, but the location of the school moved to where Dillard High School is now. And attached to this museum is actually Walker Elementary School, which was named after Clarence C. Walker, which was one of the principals of the Old Dillard School. So we see a lot of the same things that still branches off. As you know, Dillard High School is known for their sports program, not just in Florida, but the whole country. And that actually started to pick up when we knew we had to make our own sports teams. So that's been something that's been going on throughout history. Another thing is Walker Elementary School is the only school in Broward County that has a full marching band. They have the drums, they have the dancers, the majorettes, all of that. And that's something that they've had back then from when this was just a colored school. So you see different aspects and remnants of that history still breaking off for today.
Awesome. What do you hope that people will gain from their experience when they visit?
I hope that people gain how fragile history is and can be. It's very easy to lose history. It's also very easy to preserve history, but it's even easier to lose history. Life is very short, so a lot of people that experience a lot of these things, unfortunately, are no longer with us. However, there's a handful of people who still are. So I hope that they learn that this isn't just a history of something that happened in the past, but that they themselves and you yourself can be a part of the continuum to keep this history going, to talk about what's going on today with all the injustices that we're seeing, and how we have a continuum of the history that happened back then. And I'm hoping that this museum can be a place for that.
What is the future of this museum? What does that look like?
Wow, so the future of this museum looks like integrating the history and the arts here with the public school system. And that comes in different ways, from arts activities and history activities as well. Talking about not just your traditional African-American history characters, but also what some of the African-American pioneers in the local community looks like, and integrating that within the school system. I also see this museum being a place, a community hub, which is already happening. We have a lot of local social activist groups and charity groups that meet here in the museum, and they absolutely love the museum as a meeting space, and I see that continuing in the future as well.
Is there anything else you'd like us to know before I let you go?
Well, I just want to let you guys know to please come and check out the Old Dillard Museum. You can follow us on Instagram at Old Dillard Museum, or you can follow us on Facebook and like our Facebook page at the Old Dillard Museum. Thank you.